Sin has a lot more defense in this patch because of the decrease in his defense modifier value, as well as the increase to his Guts rating. Previously, before Guts kicked in, this sequence did 107 damage. Now in the current patch, it does 98 damage. In the previous patch, when Guts kicked in, this is the damage Sin took. 99 damage, so a loss of about 8 damage. This value is pretty much the same in the current patch. From 98 down to 90, so Guts is again removing about 8 damage from the sequence here when it first kicks in. When Sin's at 25% of his life, the sequence loses 40 damage overall, going down from 107 to 67. And at 25% health in the current patch, it loses 39 damage. So it's pretty much like about the same. Sin's definitely overall taking a lot less damage than he was in the previous patch, which is something that he'll appreciate considering that he's like a mid to close range brawler style of character who's likely going to get hit by the opponent a couple of times. So this could be the difference between him dying from a particular mix-up and surviving it. Sin's 6P has increased recovery. We'll go ahead and compare now. Again, this is one of the more minor adjustments to the 6P that I think we've seen throughout the entire patch. Definitely between 1 to 4 frames being added on, I think, making it a little more likely for Sin to be whiff punished and neutral, but nothing too dramatic like we've seen with a few other characters. Sin's Far S also has increased recovery. Again, this seems relatively minor, and while I don't think it's going to have as much implications for Sin's neutral like 6P does, the patch notes themselves state that this is supposed to be in line with making it a little more difficult for Sin to combo when he doesn't have stamina, which we'll explore in a little bit. 2S also had its startup increased, and the patch notes say that this is to make it so that Sin has a more difficult time comboing when he doesn't have stamina available to him. However, in all of my testing, I haven't been able to find any links that existed in the previous version of the game that don't in this version of the game. However, I also wasn't really much of a Sin main myself, so there's probably something that I'm missing here. If any Sin player knows what combos these two changes, the changes to far slash and to crouching slash, have done to the character's combo routes, do let us know in the combo section below. Another change to 2S I won't be able to demonstrate is that they've expanded the hitbox and hurt box towards the center of the attack, which I presume means they expanded it towards Sin's model itself as opposed to the staff. You'll need to find some sort of hitbox viewer online in order to fully appreciate this, but I want to mention it here just for completion's sake. The way that Sin's stamina regenerates in this patch has been changed a little bit. Previously, there'd be variable recovery rates for each bar of stamina that Sin had before. The first bar would regenerate slowly, while the other 2 bars would regenerate a little quicker. After about a 2-second cooldown, regeneration would begin. The first bar of stamina took about 6 to 7 seconds to regenerate. Compare that to the third bar of stamina. That's about maybe 2.5 to 3 seconds for the first bar, so nearly half the time to get that final bar of stamina back for Sin Kisuke. Now, all of Sin's stamina bars regenerate at the same rate, but Sin has to wait longer in order for his stamina to start regenerating. Let's go ahead and compare now. So it takes about 5 seconds for the cooldown to wear off. And then it's about 4 seconds, I think, for each bar of stamina to regenerate overall. Now, if my counting was correct, all these changes should mean that if Sin exhausts all of his stamina, it will take him longer to regenerate his entire stamina bar. Previously, if my numbers were correct, it's about 13 to 15 seconds, but in this patch, it should be about 17 seconds for him to regenerate all of those. Now, if he only uses 1 bar of stamina, he will regenerate that almost about at the same rate as he did before. In fact, it's 2 seconds slower. So the overall Sin is going to be playing with a little bit less of his stamina at times, meaning that Arc System Works want players to be a little more conservative with it. In return for this change to stamina, they've been buffing all of his follow-ups so that they have some improved properties, which we'll start getting into with each special move. The follow-up to Beak Driver has several changes to it, so I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate the old version of the move before we talk about the new version of the move. On hit, it would cause the opponent to be put into a tumble state, while also being pushed pretty far away from Sin Kisuke. There wasn't really much that Sin could do with this tumble effect. If you canceled into something like R.T.L, you wouldn't be able to combo, for example, in the old version. On block, it was slightly negative, meaning that the opponent could take their turn, and anything that followed afterwards was going to be some fake pressure. If you delayed the follow-up, it was possible for the opponent to interrupt it, but again, that's if you didn't true string into it. And if you canceled from this move, then you would lose the momentum that it had going for you. As you can see, Sin kind of paused in place when he did the follow-up Gazelle Step. Now let's take a look how the move currently behaves. Arc System Works increased the recovery of this move, but I'm not sure how much this is actually going to affect Sin because of some other changes happening underneath the hood when it comes to this move in terms of its behavior on block as well as on hit. Let's take a look at the behaviors on hit first. Now, on blowback, the move has increased tumble duration as well as decreased horizontal blowback, meaning that Sin is actually able to get new links here. This, combined with the change that allows him to preserve his momentum on cancel, means that Sin is able to link a R.T.L after this. This is actually a pretty potent buff to this move. On block, there is two noticeable differences. It now has increased knockback, so Sin isn't as close to the opponent, but this is a nerf for him because now they've added a guard crush effect to the move that is plus on block. If Sin was closer, he basically get free pressure for the cost of 1 stamina bar. With this new guard crush, Sin is able to cancel into Gazelle Step and then frame trap 4 frame normals with its close slash. A thing to note with this Beak Driver follow-up as well is that at farther ranges, the opponent is going to be likely to throw you out of the guard crush animation if you Gazelle Step in. However, at closer ranges, you're actually able to frame trap this throw. So this is actually some pretty potent stuff, since Kisuke's offense after these guard crush attacks are now real instead of fake. They also increase the movement speed of the move, making it harder for the opponent to interrupt if you do leave a gap. It is still doable, but because it's harder, I think the opponent's going to be a little wary of trying to go for this. The fact that he can frame trap a little easier with this now because of the increased movement speed is a nice boon, considering the fact that he maintains his ability to combo this from a counter hit if he go ahead and Gazelle Steps. Just like with every other invincible DP, Arc System Works has made it so you can't cancel the startup of Hawkbaker into any sort of overdrive. This basically is just making sure that there's no way getting out of evading being punished for going for a DP. Previously, Hawkbaker's follow-up didn't really have much combo potential. It launched the opponent pretty far away, and Sin Kisuke really wasn't in too much of a position to pick up any confirms here. Even with a Gazelle Step. To have this move get a little more utility in Sin's kit, Arc System Works has made a few changes. They've decreased the recovery of it, so Sin's able to act faster, as well as increased the damage and horizontal movement speed. They've also adjusted the blowback so that now, if the opponent is hit by anything other than Hawkbaker, they're going to be launched straight upwards into the sky. As you can see, Sin's able to get new links off of this without even investing any more stamina off of it. It's pretty nice to have this as a 1-bar launch. However, I have to point out that this is only the case when Hawkbaker is not the start of the combo itself. You very much get the same old knockback that you did before when you used this move. Let's take a look at Hoof Stomp's follow-up now. Previously, it would knock the opponent pretty far away. Again, another horizontal tumble that you had to follow up with a Gazelle Step to maintain offense. Additionally, in the corner, Sin Kisuke was pushed back quite a bit. And on block, the opponent will be pushed pretty far backwards as well. If you try to follow up with anything with Gazelle Step, again, you are flirting with fake pressure. Let's take a look at the current version of the move now. The move itself has had its blowback adjusted so that instead of a tumble effect, it now has a ground bounce effect. However, Sin's recovery has been increased on this move as well, meaning that he's not able to get any sort of normal follow-ups off of this, which I think is fair considering that this is a follow-up from a pretty fast overhead. With this new ground bounce effect, if you Gazelle Step, Sin is able to pick up combos. It does cost 2 bars of stamina for Sin to use, so he's not going to have common access to this overhead many of the times. So I can see why Arc System Works would give him this, whereas they've taken away some of this overhead combo potential from other characters like Anji. The knockback has also been reduced, so then when Sen Kisuke does this in the corner, he's much closer to the opponent. This can greatly improve the pressure he's able to threaten from using this follow-up. And just like as we've seen with his Beak driver follow-up, there's now a guard crush effect on this follow-up as well. And as you might have guessed, this does frame trap 4-frame reversal buttons. And just like with Hawkbaker's follow-up, if you're close enough to the opponent, you are also able to frame trap a throw attempt. Let's take a look at Elk Hunt's follow-up now. Previously, this move did guard crush before, but it did push the opponent back quite a ways. You were able to basically get the frame traps that we're seeing from all the other follow-up buffs. So this was the one option Sin Kisuke had to threaten some real offense. Let's take a look at the properties on hit now. It did 21 damage and launched the opponent pretty far across the screen. In the corner, you weren't able to pick up a combo from this. Now for a look at the current behavior of the follow-up to Elk Hunt. The situation on block is largely the same. While they have increased the recovery of Elk Hunt's follow-up, they've also increased the guard crush duration to make sure that Sin still has all the same frame advantage that he used to. They mentioned that they decreased the knockback on this, but I think this has something to do with the move on hit, as this is pretty much looks like the same spacing as it was before for Sin. Pretty far away. However, on hit, this move is noticeably improved. The opponent has its damage state changed so that now they're actually able to be juggled. In addition to that, the horizontal blowback and launch height has been increased. This means that anywhere on screen, Sin is going to be able to pick up a combo from this by doing a cancel into Gazelle Step. Some pretty potent stuff. Now for changes to Gazelle Step itself. The move can be performed individually now. With quarter circle back kick and 1 stamina bar, Sin's able to use this as a pretty fast gap closer that doesn't have any follow-ups going on with it right now. This can have some potential uses for his pressure sequencing as well. Most of the time, opponents should be used to Sin advancing like this when he's canceling into a move that has an active hitbox to it. Sin could potentially use this as a pretty gimmicky throw option to catch the opponent off guard and some of his pressure. There is a bit of confusing text here when it comes to the behavior of this Gazelle Step. The patch notes say, with an asterisk, it expends stamina when performed individually rather than as a follow-up. However, if you look at the behavior in game, you can see that when it's performed as a follow-up, it still expends the stamina gauge. And this is true for either on hit or on block. So I don't know if this is simply a mistranslation of some kind or a bug. It isn't a bug that Arc System Works has listed in their bug list that they have for this current patch that's supposed to be addressed within this month or in the follow-up thing. So for now, I'm going to assume that this is intended behavior for Sin. There's 2 other changes to Gazelle Step as well. They've increased the recovery, though as I've demonstrated, that shouldn't really matter a whole lot considering the new advantages that Sin Kisuke has. So I feel like this change is more to make sure it falls in line with intended behaviors that they wanted. And they've also shrunk the hurt box, but don't get getting ideas that this is going to be some good low-profile approach option. Both of Sin's overdrives, R.T.L and Tyrant Barrel, have some similar changes, so let's go ahead and discuss them together. Previously, if you canceled into these supers from any of his follow-ups, namely Gazelle Step, then they wouldn't cost any stamina. Now, if you do these same cancels, they do cost a bar of stamina. As you can see, Sin is now down to a single bar of stamina. Of course, this means if you run out of stamina, you can't do these cancels. So now you have to be mindful of how much stamina Sin has before you go for these particular routes now. A bit of a nerf to him. To compensate for this, both of these overdrives have had their damage increased. R.T.L's follow-ups have had their minimum guaranteed damage increased, so at the end of longer combos, Sin will be able to get some more damage. I'm unfortunately not going to be able to demonstrate that here within the time frame that I have. Instead, I'm going to be able to at least show you Tyrant Barrel's increased damage. This was Tyrant Barrel and its follow-up's old damage. 111 without the clean hit. And 131 total damage in the previous patch with clean hit. Now for Tyrant Barrel's new damage. 144 damage without the clean hit. And 165 damage with the clean hit. Pretty substantial increases. Overall, I feel like these overhauls push Sin in a pretty unique and cool direction. It is a bit of a shame that a lot of Sin is going to be gated behind all of the stamina that he's definitely going to wish he had, because he can certainly just do cool things off of everything right now. It is nice that they are incentivizing more of Sin's toolkit by increasing the potency of all of his follow-ups to basically lead to the same true strike pressure situations that previously was only reserved for Elk Hunt's Follow Up. The addition of Gazelle Step to be used as sort of a skip neutral option or a bit of a safe approach is certainly something that Sin also appreciates, just to add another layer of mental stack to the overall offense. The changes to his stamina are going to mean that while he does have buffs to his stamina and the stamina using tools, he is going to have less access to them. So a good Sin player is going to have to learn how to manage the stamina gauge even more so to consistently ensure that they're able to access these win conditions for Sin. I think it is a bit of a shame that his super cancels also require stamina, so you have to be a lot careful about when you're using those. But Sin also has tons of new opportunities to go into combos off of starters he didn't have before, and so I think that having that change is a bit appropriate, and Sin should be able to compensate for those changes by using his overdrives when he gets wall breaks or certain counter hit confirms, as opposed to kind of being the bread and butter combo finisher that he had before. Sin's a little stronger without tension gauge now, which I think is good for the character, but overall, we're going to have to see how Sin performs in this patch, simply because a lot of other characters have also had tons of changes to them that could prove to be more consistent than the changes that Sin has received in this patch. Still, just labbing him right now, I'm almost interested in learning to play him myself, because genuinely, I think this is a really cool direction to take the character.